She sent the text to the wrong number. A Korean Mafia boss replied, "Open the door, or I will." Chloe Gittens's vision blurred as her trembling fingers found the phone screen. Her left leg screamed where the bone had snapped. She could feel the wrongness of it, the way her ankle sat at an angle that made her stomach turn. The bathroom floor was arctic against her spine, but the cold was nothing compared to the heat spreading from the gash on her forehead, blood running warm and sticky down her temple, soaking into her hair. The bandage on her head was already saturated. Her right arm hung useless in its cast, the plaster still pristine white despite the violence that had put it there 2 weeks ago. She'd told the ER doctor she'd fallen down the stairs. He'd looked at her with those knowing eyes but said nothing, just like everyone else. Mark's voice filtered through the locked door, syrupy and poisonous. "Chloe, sweetheart, open up. Let me help you. You know I didn't mean it." Her husband, Detective Mark Sterling, the man who'd proposed to her after one of her jazz performances at the Blue Note, who'd stood in the spotlight and told her she made the whole world disappear when she played. The man who'd just kicked her healing leg until something inside gave way with a sound like snapping piano wire. "You made me do this. You know you did. Why do you always push me?" She knew better than to answer. Words only accelerated what was coming, but silence wouldn't save her either. Nothing ever did. Chloe fumbled for her phone with her functioning hand, her vision swimming through tears and terror. She needed Oliver, her younger brother. Oliver would come. Oliver always came, even when she told him not to. The screen turned red under her blood-stained thumb as she scrolled through contacts. Everything looked the same through the haze, names bleeding into shapes, numbers into meaningless symbols. She pressed what had to be Oliver's name and typed with one shaking finger. "He broke my leg again. Help. 2453. Morningside Heights, Apt 12B. Please." She hit send and held her breath. The door rattled in its frame. Mark's voice dropped to that velvet register, the one that always came before the worst of it. "Chloe, I'm asking nicely. Don't make me count to 3. Her phone buzzed. "Who is this?" Her heart plummeted through the bathroom floor. Wrong number. She'd texted a stranger while Mark was seconds away from breaking through the only thing standing between her and whatever came next. No. She typed faster, messier, her fingers slipping on the blood-slick screen. "Wrong number. Sorry. Husband broke my leg. Breaking down door. Need help." 3 seconds of silence that stretched like hours. Then, "Keep talking to me. I'm coming. Confirm address." Chloe's breath caught. She didn't know who this person was. Didn't know if they were real or cruel or even in the same city. But they were all she had. 2453. Morningside Heights. App 12B, please hurry. Please don't call police. Another buzz. Stay hidden. 7 minutes. Hold on. 7 minutes. She'd be dead in 7 minutes. The door lock was already splintering. "I'm counting to 3, Chloe." The voice on the other side wasn't her husband's anymore. It was the voice he used when he stopped pretending, when the badge and the public adoration fell away and the thing underneath came out. 1. She pressed herself into the corner between the tub and the wall, trying to make her body smaller, trying to disappear into the grout and tile and cold porcelain. 2. Her phone screen dimmed. The last message sat there like a rope thrown into a pit. "Hold on." 2 words from a stranger who might not even come. 3. "Welcome to Dora's Romance Stories. And honey, you just stepped into something you can't unsee. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do safe here. We do dangerous. We do addictive. We do the kind of love that burns through your veins and refuses to let go. And if you're new, buckle up, because what you're about to witness is a collision so violent, so inevitable, it'll rewrite everything you thought you knew about second chances. Hit that like button like your life depends on it. Subscribe because you're already hooked. And smash that notification bell because missing what comes next would be a crime. Now, let's watch how a wrong number text changed 2 lives forever. The door exploded inward. Splinters of cheap painted wood scattered across tile like shrapnel. Mark Sterling filled the doorframe, 6'3", shoulders heaving, eyes flat and empty like river stones. He wasn't looking at her like she was his wife. He was looking at her like she was a problem that needed permanent solving. "Who were you texting?" He moved fast. Before Chloe could pull the phone away, his hand closed around her casted arm and yanked her upright. The pain was a living creature. White-hot, total, swallowing every thought except the scream that tore from her throat. Mark ripped the phone from her grip, scrolled through the messages. His face went rigid. "Who the hell is this? You called someone? You think someone's coming for you?" "Wrong number," she gasped through the agony. "I was trying to text Oliver." The backhand came so hard her vision sparked. She tasted copper. Blood from her split lip mixed with the blood from her head wound. "You think I'm stupid?" Mark grabbed a fistful of her hair, her beautiful natural curls that he'd once said he loved, and dragged her from the bathroom through the bedroom doorway. "Nobody's coming, Chloe. Nobody's going to save you. You're mine." She hit the bed and bounced, her broken leg screaming. Mark paced the room, running his hands through his hair, muttering under his breath about how she made him do this, how she never learned, how everything would be fine if she just listened. "You need to understand something." His voice was eerily calm now. He was reaching for his service weapon, the one he wore even at home. "You don't get to leave. You don't get to call for help. You don't—" Car doors slammed outside. Heavy. Multiple. Mark froze. Chloe's pulse hammered in her throat. 7 minutes. It hadn't even been 5. Footsteps. Not the shuffle of neighbors or the casual stroll of someone heading home after a late shift. These were purposeful, tactical, climbing the exterior stairs to their third-floor apartment with the precision of soldiers moving toward an objective. Mark's hand went to his gun. "Who did you call?" "I don't know," Chloe whispered. And it was the truth. The footsteps stopped outside their door. Then the knocking started. 3 slow, deliberate strikes that didn't sound like a request. They sounded like a warning. The knocking stopped. The apartment held its breath. Then the front door didn't open. It simply ceased to exist. No splintering crash. No dramatic kick. One moment it was there, the next it was removed from its hinges with surgical precision and set aside like it had never mattered at all. Mark's hand was already on his gun when the first man entered. He was silent as death, dressed in black tactical gear that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Then another. And another. They filled the doorway like shadows given form, but none of them moved toward the bedroom. They simply stood there, a wall of absolute stillness, waiting. Then he walked in. Han-gil didn't rush. He didn't need to. He moved through Chloe's destroyed living room with the unhurried grace of a man who knew the world would wait for him. Camel-colored coat, perfectly tailored, not a thread out of place despite the hour. His face was all sharp angles and dangerous beauty, the kind that made you forget to breathe until your lungs burned. But it was the tattoos crawling up his neck that made Chloe's heart stutter. Dragons, black ink disappearing beneath his collar, marking him as exactly what he was. And his eyes, dark as obsidian, flat, empty of everything except a terrible, patient focus. He looked at Mark the way someone might look at an insect on expensive marble. "Get out of my house!" Mark's voice cracked as he raised his service weapon, his shield glinting on his belt. "I'm a police detective. I know what you are." Han-gil's voice was quiet, almost conversational, with the barest trace of an accent that made each word sound deliberate. He took another step into the bedroom. His men didn't follow. They didn't need to. "I'll shoot." Mark's gun hand shook. Han-gil smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Chloe had ever seen. A thin, cold line that held no humor, no warmth, nothing human at all. Just the promise of something inevitable. "You won't." He moved. Chloe didn't see it happen. One moment, Han-gil was near the door. The next, he was beside the bed, his hand closed around Mark's wrist. There was a sound wet, organic, wrong, and Mark's scream split the air. The gun clattered to the floor. Mark's hand hung at an unnatural angle, the same grotesque wrongness Chloe had seen in her own leg just minutes before. Poetic justice delivered without a word. Mark crumpled, clutching his shattered wrist, his face gone gray with shock and pain. Han-gil released him like he was discarding something distasteful, then turned to Chloe. For the first time since entering, His expression shifted. Not softening, nothing about him was soft, but the flat emptiness in his eyes gained dimension. Recognition. Assessment. Something else she couldn't name. "Can you stand?" His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. Chloe tried. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. The adrenaline that had kept her conscious was draining away, leaving nothing but pain and exhaustion, and the dreamlike unreality of a Korean man in a designer coat standing in her bedroom at midnight because she'd texted the wrong number. Han-gil didn't wait for an answer. He shrugged out of his coat, cashmere, camel-colored, still warm from his body, and draped it over her shoulders. The scent hit her immediately. Cedar and something darker underneath. Gunpowder, maybe. Or blood. The coat swallowed her. Heavy and luxurious and completely incongruous with the horror of the last hour. He bent down, and Chloe's breath caught as he slid one arm beneath her knees, the other around her back, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. She should have been terrified. This stranger, this man who'd just broken her husband's bones with casual efficiency, was carrying her out of her own apartment. But the fear that should have been there was drowned by something else entirely. Relief, exhaustion, and underneath it, barely acknowledged the feeling of being held by someone who wasn't hurting her. Han-gil's face was inches from hers. She could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the way his jaw tensed as he adjusted his grip to avoid her injuries. His breath was steady, controlled, while hers came in shallow gasps. "You texted me," he said, so quiet Mark couldn't hear over his own sobbing. "That makes you mine now." Not a question, not a comfort. A statement of fact delivered with the certainty of a man who'd never been told no in his life. Chloe should have protested. Should have demanded answers. Should have done anything except let this stranger carry her past his silent army of men, past her destroyed front door, past the life she'd known. But she didn't, because the monster holding her felt safer than the man she'd married. And that terrified her most of all. Chloe woke to sunlight that shouldn't exist. Not the gray, filtered light of her apartment windows with their view of the building's brick wall across the alley. This was pure, unobstructed morning pouring through floor-to-ceiling glass that stretched impossibly high. She blinked against the brightness, her mind struggling to reconcile the last thing she remembered. Han-gil's arms, the backseat of a car that smelled like leather and danger with the palace she'd woken up in. Because that's what it was. A palace suspended in the sky. The bed beneath her was a cloud of silk sheets the color of champagne. Her broken leg rested on a pillow, encased in something that looked more like aerospace engineering than a medical cast. Sleek black carbon fiber with subtle LED indicators pulsing a soft blue. No pain. Whatever they'd given her had reduced the agony to a distant throb. She sat up slowly, her body protesting in a dozen places that had nothing to do with her leg. The room was enormous. All clean lines and expensive minimalism, white walls, dark wood, and those windows. God, those windows. They offered the city like a gift laid at her feet. 40 floors up, maybe more. High enough that the streets below looked like distant rivers of light, high enough that Seoul stretched out in every direction, glittering and vast and utterly foreign. The thought came unbidden. High enough that jumping wouldn't be quick. Chloe pushed it away and stood, testing her legs. Her feet met heated marble, and she realized she was wearing silk pajamas she'd never seen before. Black, perfectly fitted. Someone had changed her clothes while she slept. The intimacy of that violation should have terrified her. But it was swallowed by a larger, more pressing question. Where the hell was she? She found a door, black lacquered wood, with no visible handle, and pressed her palm against it. It slid open with a whisper, revealing a hallway that belonged in an architectural magazine. She moved through it, her bare feet silent, following the sound of, was that water? A fountain? The hallway opened into a living space that stole what was left of her breath. The penthouse stretched out like a temple to wealth and power. Everything was monochrome elegance, from the low-slung leather furniture to the abstract art that probably cost more than her entire life. But it was the view that held her captive, a 360-degree panorama of Seoul waking up beneath her. Beautiful, isn't it? Chloe spun. A man stood near the entrance, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that marked him as one of Han Gyul's. His face was professionally blank, but his body blocked the only visible exit. "I need to leave." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Miss Gittens." Miss Gittens, not Mrs. Sterling. The absence of Mark's last name felt like freedom and imprisonment braided together. "You can't keep me here." She moved toward him anyway, testing. He didn't shift, didn't reach for a weapon. He simply existed as an immovable barrier, polite and absolute. "You should sit down. Mr. Han will want to speak with you." "I don't care what Mr. Han wants. You care very much what I want." The voice came from behind her, and Chloe's heart performed some complicated acrobatics that left her breathless. She turned to find Han Gyul emerging from a doorway she hadn't noticed, a cup of tea in his hand. He wore different clothes, charcoal slacks, a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing forearms corded with muscle and decorated with ink that disappeared beneath the fabric. He looked less like a businessman and more like what he actually was. Dangerous. "Your leg." He gestured with the tea, those obsidian eyes tracking her with unnerving focus. "The surgeon says you'll regain full mobility in 8 weeks. Your arm cast can come off in 3. The head wound required 12 stitches, but there's no concussion." Who are you?" Han Gyul smiled. Not the terrifying, empty smile from last night. Something different. Something that might have been amusement if it reached his eyes. "Han Gyul, head of the Black Dragon Syndicate." He said it like he was introducing himself as an accountant. "And you, Chloe Gittens, are the woman who accidentally asked a stranger for help." He moved closer, and Chloe's instinct was to step back. But her body wouldn't cooperate, maybe because of the injuries, maybe because of something else entirely. "You've been on the news," he continued, setting the tea down on a glass table. "Your husband is playing the grieving detective, claims you were kidnapped by a violent gang, that you're mentally unstable, an addict, that he's terrified for your safety." The words hit like physical blows. "That's not—" "I know." Han Gyul's voice went cold. "I've known what he is for a long time." Chloe's mind spun. "What does that mean?" Han Gyul tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he was deciding whether to solve. "It means, Chloe Gittens, that you're not the first woman Mark Sterling has hurt. But if you let me, you'll be the last." He extended his hand toward her, not threatening, not demanding, offering. "To the world, you are a victim," he said quietly. "To me, you are something else entirely. So choose. Do you want to go back to the man who broke you, or do you want to learn how to break him instead?" Chloe looked at his outstretched hand, at the man who destroyed her front door and shattered her husband's wrist with the same casual efficiency most people used to swat flies, at the dangerous, beautiful stranger who'd somehow known her name before she'd ever told him. She thought about Mark, about the badge he wore like armor, about the way he'd convinced everyone she was the problem. She thought about her piano, about the music she hadn't played in 3 years because Mark said her hobby was getting in the way of being a proper wife. She thought about her brother Oliver and how many times he'd begged her to leave. Chloe reached out and took Han Gyul's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, and absolutely certain. "Good girl," he murmured. "Now let me show you what happens to men who hurt what's mine." The door exploded inward, just as the front entrance to the apartment ceased to exist. 2 breaches, simultaneous. One brutal and desperate, the other surgical and absolute. Mark Sterling stood in the splintered bathroom doorway, his service weapon raised, his face twisted into something that wasn't quite human anymore. Behind him, through the bedroom, Chloe could see shapes moving through her living room, black-clad figures that flowed like smoke through the destroyed entrance. "You stupid bitch," Mark hissed, his gun hand shaking. "What did you do? Who did you—" He never finished the sentence. The first man through the bedroom door moved like a shadow detaching from the wall. Silent, efficient. Mark spun toward him, but his movements were too slow, too panicked. The man's hand struck Mark's wrist with precision that spoke of years of training, and the gun clattered across the tile floor, spinning to rest near Chloe's broken leg. Mark swung wild, his fist connecting with nothing but air. Another figure materialized behind him, when had there been two, and Mark's arm was wrenched behind his back with a sickening crack that made Chloe flinch despite everything he'd done to her. He screamed. The sound was animal, raw. Nothing like the controlled, silky violence he'd used on her for 3 years. This was what fear sounded like when it had nowhere to hide. Down, one of the men said. Just one word. Flat, emotionless. Mark went down hard, his knees slamming into the bathroom tile. The same tile Chloe had pressed her spine against just minutes ago, trying to disappear. The man behind him maintained pressure on his shattered arm, keeping him pinned in a position of submission that would have been poetic if Chloe had the capacity to appreciate irony. But she didn't. She was staring at the bedroom doorway, where he had just appeared. Han-gyeol moved through the wreckage of her apartment like he owned it, like he owned everything. The camel coat hung perfectly from his shoulders despite the violence he'd just orchestrated. The fabric catching the dim light in a way that made it look liquid, expensive. His neck tattoos were fully visible now, dragons coiling up from beneath his collar, black ink against skin that seemed to glow in contrast. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. Sharp, purposeful, dangerous. His eyes found hers immediately, and something in Chloe's chest contracted. That same obsidian gaze from the moment he'd first stepped into her bedroom, flat and endless, patient. But now there was something else underneath. Something that looked almost like concern, if concern could exist in a man who'd just ordered the systematic destruction of everything familiar in her life. He didn't look at Mark, didn't acknowledge him beyond stepping over his kneeling form like he was debris on an otherwise clear path. Please, Mark gasped, his voice breaking. Blood ran from his nose where his face had connected with the tile. Please, I'm a police detective. Badge number 4,457. You can't, this is assault on an officer. You can't. I can. Han-gyeol's voice was quiet, conversational. He crouched in front of Chloe, his coat pooling around him like water. And I did. He reached toward her face, and Chloe's instinct was to flinch, to pull away, to protect herself from the hand that was coming toward her because hands always hurt. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. Han-gyeol's fingers were gentle when they touched the bandage on her head, impossibly gentle for a man who'd just orchestrated a tactical breach. He examined the blood-soaked gauze, his jaw tightening in a way that suggested he was performing calculations. Assessments. Determining damage. Head wound, he said. Not quite a question. Chloe nodded. Her voice had abandoned her somewhere between the wrong number text and this moment. The leg? Broken. The word came out as a whisper. He kicked it. It was already fractured from last month, but tonight I know. Han-gyeol's eyes shifted to her casted arm. And this? 2 weeks ago. He said I embarrassed him at a department dinner. Something flickered across Han-gyeol's face. Not quite anger, something colder. More final. He stood in one fluid motion and turned to Mark. Finally acknowledged him. The way someone might finally acknowledge a stain they'd been ignoring. Detective Sterling. Han-gyeol's accent wrapped around the title like he was tasting something foul. You enjoy breaking beautiful things. She's my wife. Mark spat, trying to sound authoritative, even as the man behind him increased pressure on his ruined arm. You have no right. I have every right. Han-gyeol moved closer to him, each step deliberate. You see, detective, you made a critical error. You hurt something that belongs to me. She doesn't belong to you, Mark snarled. She's mine. I married her. I own. The kick was so fast, Chloe almost missed it. Han-gyeol's foot connected with Mark's ribs, and the detective folded like paper, gasping for air that wouldn't come. You own nothing, Han-gyeol said softly. You never did. He turned back to Chloe, and the violence evaporated from his expression like it had never existed. He shrugged out of his coat that beautiful camel cashmere that probably cost more than her piano had, and draped it over her shoulders with the same care someone might use handling glass. The weight of it was shocking. Warm. It smelled like cedar and something darker. Something that made her think of expensive restaurants and back rooms where decisions were made that altered the world. I'm going to pick you up now, Han-gyeol said, his voice dropping to something meant only for her. It's going to hurt. I apologize for that. Before Chloe could respond, his arm slid beneath her knees, carefully avoiding her broken leg. The other arm wrapped around her back, supporting her weight as he lifted her from the bathroom floor in one smooth motion. The pain was immediate, white-hot lightning that shot from her leg through her entire body. Chloe gasped, her functioning hand instinctively clutching at Hangil's shirt, fisting in the expensive fabric. "I know," he murmured against her hair. "I know. Just hold on to me." He carried her through the bathroom doorway, stepping over Mark's prone form without breaking stride. The detective was still curled around his shattered ribs, making sounds that weren't quite words. "Wait," Chloe managed, her voice hoarse. "My brother, Oliver, he doesn't know I'm Mark will go after him. He'll..." "Already handled." Hangil adjusted his grip, pulling her closer against his chest. "Your brother is under protection. He's safe. How did you..." "Later." His eyes met hers, and there was something in them that made her breath catch. "Right now, we leave. Right now you're safe. I've got you." The apartment was full of his men, 6, maybe 7, all dressed in tactical black, all standing with that same absolute stillness, waiting for orders that hadn't come yet. Hangil carried her through the destroyed living room, past the front door that had been removed from its hinges like it was made of cardboard instead of solid wood. The night air hit her face, cold and sharp and tasting like freedom. "What about him?" One of the men gestured back toward the apartment, toward Mark. Hangil paused at the top of the exterior stairs, Chloe still cradled against his chest. "Clean the scene," he said. "Make sure the detective understands that if he files a report, if he breathes her name to anyone, I'll come back, and next time, I won't be gentle." He started down the stairs, each step measured and careful. Chloe pressed her face against his shoulder, her body shaking with exhaustion and shock, and something that might have been relief. Behind them, from the apartment, Mark Sterling's voice rose in a broken scream. It was the sound of a man realizing he'd lost, and for the first time in 3 years, Chloe Gittens smiled. Sterling used his badge to abuse his wife without consequences. If you hate cowards who hide behind authority to hurt women, hit that subscribe button. Comment, "Justice for Chloe," to show you stand with her. Chloe woke to the sound of her own heartbeat. Not the frantic, terror-soaked rhythm she'd fallen asleep to, but something steadier, monitored. She could hear the soft beep of medical equipment before she opened her eyes, a rhythmic pulse that told her she was alive. She was breathing. She was somewhere that cared whether those things continued. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft. Not the lumpy mattress she'd shared with Mark, the one that dipped in the middle and smelled faintly of his cologne even after she washed the sheets. This was cloud-soft, wrapped in fabric that felt like water against her skin. She opened her eyes to white. Pure, clean white that stretched across a ceiling so high it seemed to disappear. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated one wall, but the glass was tinted, filtering the morning light into something gentle, manageable, the kind of light that didn't assault you when you were trying to remember how you'd survived the night. Chloe turned her head slowly, cataloging the damage. Her leg was elevated on a pillow, encased in something that looked more like aerospace technology than medical equipment. Sleek black carbon fiber with subtle LED indicators pulsing a soft blue along the seams. The cast on her arm had been replaced with something similar, lightweight, breathable, nothing like the heavy plaster that had weighed her down for 2 weeks. The bandage on her head was fresh, clean. She reached up with her functioning hand and felt professional gauze work, the kind that came from someone who knew what they were doing. How long had she been asleep? Movement caught her eye. A woman in elegant clothes, not scrubs, but something that suggested medical authority wrapped in designer fabric stood near a glass desk, making notes on a tablet. "You're awake," the woman said in accented English. Korean, but her pronunciation was flawless. "Good. Your vitals have been stable for 6 hours. The surgeon will want to examine you, but the immediate danger has passed." "Surgeon?" Chloe's voice came out rough, unused. "Dr. Choi." He set your leg properly. The previous break had healed incorrectly, so he had to re-break it to align the bone. You'll thank him later. Re-break. The word sat in Chloe's stomach like lead. Someone had deliberately broken her leg again while she was unconscious. And this woman was talking about it like it was routine maintenance. Where am I? Gangnam. Mr. Han's private residence. The woman set down her tablet and moved to a tray that Chloe hadn't noticed, pouring water into a crystal glass. You're safe here. No one enters without his permission. She offered the water, and Chloe took it with shaking hands. The first sip was heaven, cold and clean and tasting like it had been filtered through diamonds. I need to leave, Chloe said, though even as she spoke the words, she wasn't sure she meant them. I need to call my brother. Your brother is safe. Mr. Han made arrangements. The woman's expression softened slightly. As for leaving, that's between you and him. I'm just here to ensure you don't damage my surgical work by doing something foolish. Before Chloe could respond, the woman gestured toward the wall opposite the windows. There's a television. Remote is on the side table. Mr. Han suggested you might want to watch the news. Then she was gone, disappearing through a door that blended seamlessly into the white wall, leaving Chloe alone in what was essentially a luxury hospital room, suspended somewhere in the Seoul skyline. The remote was exactly where the woman had indicated. Chloe picked it up, her fingers clumsy, and pressed power. The screen materialized from what she'd thought was a blank wall television technology she'd only seen in magazines and immediately showed a news channel. Korean, but with English subtitles scrolling across the bottom. Her own face stared back at her. The photo was from 2 years ago. She'd been smiling, standing next to Mark at some department function, his arm around her waist, both of them looking like the perfect couple. The headline made her stomach drop. Detective's wife kidnapped by organized crime syndicate. Mark filled the screen, sitting in what looked like a police conference room. His face was bruised. She remembered Han-gyeol's kick, the way he'd folded but he'd played it up, added shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept. His voice was broken, desperate. Chloe has been struggling, he said, staring directly into the camera with those eyes that had once made her feel safe. She's been under tremendous stress. Her mental health has deteriorated over the past year. I've tried to get her help, but she refused treatment. Last night, she had an episode. When I tried to intervene, she hurt herself and called someone. I don't know who, but they came and they took her. Chloe's hands tightened on the remote, pain shooting through her casted arm. She's not well, Mark continued, his voice cracking perfectly. She's been self-medicating. I found pills in her purse last week, prescription medications that weren't prescribed to her. I'm terrified that whoever has her will take advantage of her condition, will hurt her. The reporter's voice cut in. Detective Sterling, you're saying your wife was kidnapped by a gang? I don't know what else to call them. Armed men, professional. They destroyed our home and took her. If anyone has information, please help me bring my wife home. The screen cut to the reporter standing outside Chloe's apartment building. Detective Mark Sterling, a decorated officer with 12 years of service, is appealing to the public for help in finding his wife, Chloe Sterling, who was allegedly abducted from their home last night by what police are calling an organized criminal enterprise. If you have any information... The television went black. Chloe looked up to find Han-gyeol standing in the doorway, the remote in his hand. He'd changed clothes since last night, black slacks, a charcoal shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing those tattooed forearms. His hair was pushed back from his face, and in the filtered morning light, he looked almost human. Almost. He's convincing, Han-gyeol said, moving into the room with that same unhurried grace. I'll give him that. The bruises are a nice touch. Makes him look like the victim. Everyone will believe him. Chloe's voice was hollow. He's a decorated detective. I'm just his crazy wife who couldn't handle the pressure of being married to a cop. Yes, they will believe him. Han-gyeol sat on the edge of her bed, close enough that she could smell cedar and something darker. The media will run with his story. Your friends will offer him sympathy. His department will rally behind him. To the world, you are unstable. Kidnapped. A victim who needs rescuing from the dangerous criminals who took you. He tilted his head, studying her with those obsidian eyes that seemed to see through skin to whatever was underneath. But that's what he sees. What the world sees. Han-gyeol's hand moved to rest on the bed beside her leg, not touching, just present. To me, you are something else entirely. What am I to you? The question came out before Chloe could stop it. You don't know me. I sent you a wrong number text and you destroyed my life. Why? I didn't destroy your life, Chloe. I ended your death. His voice dropped lower, intimate. And I know you. I've known you for 5 years. Her heart stuttered. That's not possible. I've never seen you before last night. No, but I've seen you. Han-gyeol's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile if it reached his eyes. The blue note. 5 years ago. You played a jazz set that made the entire room forget to breathe. I was there on business, meeting someone I needed to persuade. But then you started playing, and I forgot why I'd come. I stayed until the last note. Chloe stared at him. The blue note. She remembered that venue. Remembered the night she'd played Coltrane's Naima, and felt like she'd finally understood what the music meant. Mark had been in the audience too, that night. Had approached her after with compliments and a smile that seemed genuine. You remember, Han-gyeol said. It wasn't a question. You remember that night, the night you met your husband. Yes. He wasn't the only one who noticed you. Han-gyeol's hand moved closer, his fingers brushing the carbon fiber cast on her leg. But I'm not a good man, Chloe. I don't interrupt weddings or convince women to leave their husbands. I respected your choice. Even when I saw the light in your eyes start to dim. Even when you stopped performing. Even when I knew. Knew what? That he was killing you slowly, methodically, taking away everything that made you burn. His eyes locked onto hers. But then you sent me a text, asked me for help, and that changed everything. The room was too small suddenly, too intimate. Chloe's breath came faster, her heart rate spiking enough that the medical equipment beeped a warning. So here's the truth. Han-gyeol continued, his voice steady despite the chaos he was creating in her chest. To the world, you are a victim, a mentally unstable woman who was kidnapped by criminals. That's the story they want, the story that makes sense. But to me, he leaned closer, his face inches from hers, near enough that she could see the flecks of amber in those obsidian eyes. To me, you are a queen who forgot she had a kingdom, and I'm offering you a choice. Chloe Gittens, you can go back to him. Let me arrange your return. Play the role of the rescued victim. Return to your cage and pretend last night never happened. His hand moved to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with impossible gentleness. Or you can stay. Let me show you what it means to be treasured, instead of tolerated. Protected instead of punished. Let me burn down everyone who ever made you small. Chloe's voice came out as a whisper. And what would that make me? Your prisoner? Your possession? Han-gyeol's smile was slow, dangerous, beautiful. No, Chloe. That would make you mine. The choice hung between them like smoke, shapeless and suffocating. Chloe stared at Han-gyeol's hand still resting against her face, thumb tracing the edge of her cheekbone with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about men who broke down doors and shattered bones. I need to think, she whispered. Han-gyeol's smile didn't waver. You have time. Not much, but some. He stood, that fluid grace making it look like gravity was optional. Your leg needs another examination in 2 hours. Dr. Choi is particular about his work. Until then, you should eat something, build your strength back. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't read. There's something I want to show you. When you're ready, when you can walk. Walk? Chloe looked down at her elevated leg, the carbon fiber cast glowing with its soft blue indicators. The doctor said, the cast is designed for mobility, weight-bearing. It's not like what your husband let you suffer with. Han-gyeol's voice went cold on the word husband. You'll be on your feet within the hour. If you choose to be. The question is whether you're brave enough to see what I've been keeping for you. Then he was gone, leaving Chloe alone with her heartbeat and the city stretched out beyond the tinted windows. An hour later, she was standing, barely. The physical therapist who'd appeared another elegant woman who seemed to exist somewhere between medical professional and high-end concierge had shown her how the cast worked, how the carbon fiber supported her weight, while the internal sensors adjusted to her movements, compensating for the healing bone. It hurt. Not the screaming agony of last night, but a deep ache that reminded her with every step that her body had been broken and was still being rebuilt. But she could walk. The therapist left her with a lightweight cane, sleek black metal that matched the cast, and instructions to move slowly. Chloe stood in the medical suite, wearing clothes that had appeared while she'd been examined. Black silk pants that draped perfectly. A soft gray cashmere sweater that probably cost more than a month's rent. Everything fit like it had been made for her body specifically. Because it probably had been. The door slid open at her approach, responding to some sensor she couldn't see. The hallway beyond was exactly as she remembered from her brief, panicked exploration earlier, all clean lines and expensive minimalism. But now she noticed details she'd missed. The art on the walls wasn't just abstract decoration. Each piece was original, real, the kind of paintings that lived in museums, not private residences. She followed the sound of piano music, not a recording. Someone was playing, and playing well. The melody was familiar, Debussy, Clair de Lune, but the execution was flawless, professional. The hallway opened into a room that made Chloe forget how to breathe. It was a music room. No, not just a music room. A sanctuary. The space was circular, rising 2 stories high with a domed ceiling that seemed to capture and hold sound. Windows curved along one side, offering that same impossible view of Seoul, but the rest of the walls were lined with acoustic panels carved with patterns that were beautiful and functional. And in the center, catching the light like a dark jewel, sat a Steinway Model D concert grand piano. Hanjol sat at the keys, his fingers moving across them with the confidence of someone who'd spent years learning the language of music. He didn't look up when she entered, just continued playing, letting the notes wash through the space like water. Chloe moved closer, each step sending dull pain through her leg. But she barely noticed. She was transfixed by the sight of this dangerous man playing Debussy like he was having a conversation with a ghost. The final notes faded into silence. Han Gyeol's hands rested on the keys for a moment before he looked up at her. "You came. You play." It wasn't what she meant to say, but it was all her mind could produce. "Poorly. My mother insisted on lessons when I was young. She believed music civilized men who were born to violence." His smile was slight, self-deprecating in a way that seemed almost human. "She was wrong, but I kept playing anyway. Some habits survive their purpose." He stood, gesturing to the piano. "This one is for you, though. I don't presume to play it well. I keep it tuned for when you're ready." Chloe's hand tightened on the cane. "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, Han Gyeol moved to a cabinet built seamlessly into the wall. He pressed something, and a section slid open to reveal shelves lined with vinyl records and what looked like old recording equipment. "The Blue Note kept archives," he said, pulling out a record with hands that treated it like religious artifact. "Most venues don't anymore. Everything's digital, disposable. But the owner was old school. He recorded every set on vinyl, said the medium captured something digital couldn't. Soul, maybe, or just the mistakes that make music human." He held up the record. The label read, "Chloe Gittens, Live at the Blue Note, the 17th of March 2020. Chloe's legs nearly gave out. She'd forgotten about those recordings, had barely thought about them after she married Mark, after he'd convinced her that performing was selfish, that real wives supported their husbands' careers instead of chasing their own dying dreams. "I bought every recording the owner would sell me," Han Gyeol continued. "He wouldn't part with all of them, said some belonged to history. But these 5, he gestured to the shelf where 4 more records sat, spaced like treasures. "These he let me have, for the right price." "Why?" Chloe's voice cracked. "Why would you do that?" Han Gyeol set the record down carefully and moved toward her. Not threatening, just present, close enough that she could see the way his jaw tensed, the way his eyes held something that looked dangerously close to vulnerability. "Because that night at the Blue Note, you played like you were on fire, like the music was burning through you, and you didn't care if it consumed you completely. I've built an empire on reading people, Chloe. on knowing who's dangerous and who's just pretending. And you, he paused, his hand reaching out to touch her face again, that same gentle gesture that made her heart stutter. You were the most dangerous thing I'd ever seen, because you were real, in a world of people playing roles. I'm not dangerous, Chloe whispered. Look at me. I'm broken. I let him. You survived. Hangyeol's voice went hard, sharp. You survived 3 years with a man who systematically destroyed everything beautiful about you. And you still had enough fire left to send that text. To ask for help. That's not weakness, Chloe. That's titanium wrapped in silk. He moved past her to a wall she'd thought was solid, but at his touch, it split open to reveal another room. Smaller, more intimate. The walls were lined with photographs, candid shots from different angles, different venues. All of her. At the piano, lost in the music, glowing with the kind of joy she barely remembered feeling. I attended every public performance you gave in Seoul, Hangyeol said quietly. 14 shows over 2 years. I sat in the back, never approached, never let you see me. Because you'd made your choice. You'd chosen him. And I'm many things, Chloe. But I'm not the man who takes what isn't offered. Chloe stared at the photographs. At evidence of obsession that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. Because underneath the obsession was something else. Respect. Restraint. He'd watched her for years, and never once crossed the line until she'd inadvertently invited him into her nightmare. You stopped performing 2 years ago. Hangyeol continued. I noticed. I made inquiries. Learned you'd married the detective who'd been in the audience that first night. The one who'd approached you after your set with compliments and flowers. I told myself it was good. That you'd found someone who appreciated what you were. That you were happy. He turned to look at her, and the emptiness in his eyes wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something dark and possessive and absolutely certain. But then you stopped posting on social media, stopped seeing your friends. Your brother made noise about checking on you, but your husband always had reasonable explanations. Work stress, creative depression, the normal struggles of artistic temperament. And I told myself it wasn't my business, that I had no right to intervene in a marriage between 2 people I didn't really know. But you were wrong, Chloe said softly. I was wrong. Hangyeol moved closer. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him. I was wrong to respect boundaries that were being used as prison walls. I was wrong to assume you'd reach out if you needed help. I was wrong about everything except one thing. What? His hand cupped her face, tilting it up so she had no choice but to meet those obsidian eyes that saw through everything. That you were worth waiting for. Worth the patience. Worth the restraint. And when you finally sent that text even to the wrong number, I knew. The universe was giving me permission to do what I should have done 2 years ago. And what's that? Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. Hangyeol smiled, slow and dangerous and beautiful. Burn down everyone who made you forget you were fire. 3 days passed in the penthouse like a fever dream. Chloe's leg healed faster than should have been possible, doctor. Choi's work combined with whatever medications they were giving her that came in unmarked bottles and tasted like bitter promises. She could walk without the cane now, though Hangyeol insisted she keep it nearby, just in case. She'd played the Steinway once, just once. Her fingers had found the keys like coming home, and she'd played for 2 hours straight, while Hangyeol sat in the corner of the music room, perfectly still, watching her like she was performing surgery instead of playing Coltrane. When she'd finished, exhausted and exhilarated and feeling more alive than she had in years, he'd simply said, "Again tomorrow," and left her there with the piano and the city lights and the terrifying realization that she didn't want to leave. Now she stood on one of the penthouse's many balconies, 43 floors above Seoul, watching the city move beneath her like a living organism. The night air was cold, but she'd wrapped herself in one of Hangyeol's cashmere throws black, like everything else he owned, and let the wind carry away thoughts she wasn't ready to examine. The balcony door slid open behind her. She didn't turn. She'd learned to recognize his footsteps, the particular way he moved through space like he owned the molecules of air around him. "You should be inside," Hangyeol said, moving to stand beside her at the railing. "It's cold. I've been inside for 3 days. I needed to remember what freedom tastes like. And does it taste how you remembered? Chloe considered the question. Below them, the city pulsed with light and life, and a million stories she'd never know. It tastes like possibility, like I could be anyone, do anything, like the past 3 years were just a nightmare I'm finally waking up from. Good. Han-gyeol's hand found hers on the railing, his fingers warm against her cold skin. Because tonight, you're going to see something, and after you see it, you'll have to decide whether you're truly awake or just trading one nightmare for another. Before Chloe could ask what he meant, voices rose from somewhere below the balcony. Angry voices. Korean. Rapid fire. The kind of argument that ended in violence or capitulation. She started to pull back, but Han-gyeol's hand tightened on hers. Watch, he said quietly. This is what I am. What I do. And you need to see it before you make your choice. The balcony overlooked an interior courtyard. She hadn't realized the penthouse had one that was lit by subtle ground lighting. 2 of Han-gyeol's men stood at attention near a fountain that probably cost more than most people's houses. Between them, forced to his knees on the stone pavement, was a man in an expensive suit that had seen better days. His face was already bruised, blood running from his nose, his hands bound behind his back with zip ties. Another man stood before him, not one of Han-gyeol's regular security. This one was broader, older, wearing a suit that marked him as someone with authority. He was speaking in Korean, his voice carrying up to the balcony with perfect clarity despite the height. What are they saying? Chloe whispered. The man on his knees is Kim Min-jun. He runs a trafficking operation out of Itaewon. Women mostly. Girls sometimes. He sells them to men who like their victims young and terrified. Han-gyeol's voice was perfectly neutral, like he was describing the weather. 3 days ago, one of his men saw you being carried from a car into this building. He reported back to Kim that I was harboring someone. Kim got curious, started asking questions, spread rumors that I'd kidnapped a detective's wife for leverage. Chloe's blood went cold. He knows who I am? He thought he did. He thought you were a tool, a means to an end, something he could use against me. Han-gyeol's hand moved from hers to rest on the small of her back, possessive and steady. He made the mistake of telling his associates that if they found you, there would be a reward, that anyone who brought you to him would be compensated generously. The man in the courtyard, Kim, was shouting now, his voice rising in what sounded like protest, or maybe pleading. Chloe couldn't tell. Didn't speak enough Korean to know the difference between a threat and a desperate prayer. The older man standing over him said something sharp. Final. Then he stepped back. Han-gyeol pulled out his phone, pressed a single button, and spoke in Korean. Just a few words. Chloe caught one. Her name. Chloe. The way he said it sounded like a verdict. In the courtyard below, the older man nodded. One of Han-gyeol's security team stepped forward with something in his hand. A blade, not a knife, something longer, more ceremonial. It caught the light like liquid silver. Don't look away, Han-gyeol said softly against her ear. If you're going to stay in my world, you need to see what happens to men who threaten what's mine. Chloe wanted to look away. Every instinct screamed at her to turn, to run, to pretend she hadn't seen what was about to happen. But Han-gyeol's hand on her back kept her steady, kept her present, and something deeper than instinct made her watch. The blade rose, fell. Kim's scream cut through the night like a siren, high and terrible and abruptly silenced when the older man said something that sounded like a command. It was over in seconds. Efficient, brutal, final. Chloe's stomach turned, but she didn't vomit, didn't collapse. She just stood there, watching as Han-gyeol's men cleaned the courtyard with the same casual efficiency they'd used to remove her apartment door from its hinges. That's who I am, Han-gyeol said quietly, his breath warm against her temple. I protect what's mine with absolute ruthlessness. Kim won't traffic another woman, won't sell another girl, won't spread another rumor about you or anyone else under my protection. The message will spread through every organization in Seoul by morning. Touch what belongs to the Black Dragon, and you don't get a second chance. Chloe turned to look at him. This man who just ordered an execution while standing beside her in the cold night air. His face was calm, almost peaceful, like he'd just handled a tedious business matter instead of ending a life. She should have been terrified. Should have run screaming back to the medical suite, demanding he let her go, let her return to the known horror of Mark instead of this unknown darkness. But she wasn't terrified. He was selling women, she heard herself say. Girls. Yes. How many? We're still finding them. At least 40 in the past 3 years, some as young as 13. Han-gyeol's voice went colder than the night air. He had police protection, paid officials to look the other way. Your husband knew about the operation, took money to ensure certain shipments weren't intercepted. The words hit like physical blows. Mark, her husband, the decorated detective who'd convinced her that his work was noble, that he was protecting the city, that every late night and every closed-door meeting was in service of justice. You have proof? I have everything. Bank records, testimony from officers he bought, photos of him collecting payments. Han-gyeol's hand moved to cup her face, turning her to look at him fully. I've been building a case against Detective Sterling for 18 months. Kim was a loose end, a connection that needed to be severed, but he made the mistake of mentioning you, of suggesting you could be used, and that moved him from business necessity to personal priority. Chloe stared into those obsidian eyes that had stopped looking empty somewhere over the past 3 days. You killed him because he threatened me. I eliminated him because he was a predator who deserved elimination. The fact that he threatened you just determined the timing. Han-gyeol's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I won't lie to you, Chloe. I won't pretend I'm a good man who operates within the boundaries of law and morality. I break men who prey on the weak. I end them. And I don't lose sleep over it. But you don't hurt innocent people. No, the word was absolute, final. I don't. Chloe looked back down at the courtyard. It was clean now, spotless, like nothing had happened. Like a man hadn't just died for threatening something Han-gyeol considered his. She thought about Mark. About how he'd used his badge to hurt her, to control her, to systematically destroy every piece of who she'd been. About how he was on television right now, playing the grieving husband while planning his next move, his next victim. She thought about the women Kim had trafficked, the girls he'd sold, the lives he'd destroyed while men like Mark looked the other way for cash. And she thought about Han-gyeol, who'd watched her play piano for 5 years without ever approaching, who'd respected her choice even when it was killing her, who'd come when she called, even to a wrong number, and burned down her prison without asking for permission. I'm not afraid of you, Chloe said quietly. Han-gyeol's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. You should be. No. She turned fully to face him, ignoring the dull ache in her healing leg. I should be afraid of men who hurt women and call it love, who destroy beauty and call it protection, who use authority as a weapon and call it justice. I should be afraid of my husband. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of him, close enough to see the amber flecks in those dark eyes. But you? You're the monster who kills monsters, and I don't know what that makes me, but I'm not afraid of your darkness. I think, her voice caught, I think I feel safer in your darkness than I ever did in Mark's light. Han-gyeol's hand tightened on her face. Chloe, show me, she whispered. Show me how to be fire again. Show me how to burn down everyone who made me forget I had teeth. His smile was slow, dangerous, beautiful. As you wish. Han-gyeol protects what is his, while Sterling destroys what he claims to love. If you believe a real man protects his partner, smash that like button. Comment, real men protect, if you're not siding with the abuser. The call came at 3 a.m, shattering the fragile peace Chloe had built over the past week. She'd been sleeping, actually sleeping. Not just lying awake, waiting for footsteps that meant violence when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The phone Han-gyeol had given her, untraceable and secure. The one that only 3 people had the number to. Oliver's name flashed on the screen. Chloe grabbed it, her heart already racing. Ollie? Chloe. Her brother's voice was tight. Scared. Oliver, who'd faced down their alcoholic father at 16, who'd put himself through college while working 2 jobs, who never sounded afraid of anything. Chloe, I'm so sorry. I didn't. They came to my apartment. They said I was harboring a fugitive. They found the phone was ripped from his grip. She heard the sound of struggle, Oliver shouting something. Then Mark's voice poured into her ear like poison. "Hello, sweetheart. Miss me?" Chloe's blood turned to ice. She sat up in bed, her healing leg protesting the sudden movement. "Mark, your brother's in quite a bit of trouble. Possession with intent to distribute, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer. That last one's going to be particularly hard to overcome, given that 3 of my colleagues witnessed it." His voice was silk over razors. "He's looking at 10 years minimum, probably 15. You know what happens to pretty boys like Oliver in prison? He didn't do anything." Chloe's voice shook. "You planted those drugs. I'm a decorated detective, Chloe. Who's going to believe that I fabricated evidence against my brother-in-law? Especially when my wife is currently being held hostage by a known criminal organization?" Mark's laugh was soft, intimate. The sound he used to make when they were alone, and he was explaining why she'd made him hurt her. "The narrative is already set. Oliver was helping your captors, passing messages, maybe even taking payment. When we raided his apartment, he attacked us. It's all very tragic. What do you want?" "You know what I want. You come home. You do a press conference with me. You tell everyone that you were drugged, confused, that the gang manipulated you. You apologize for the trouble you've caused, and you come back to where you belong." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Do that, and Oliver walks. Charges dropped, evidence lost. He goes back to his pathetic little life, and you go back to being my wife. And if I don't, then your brother dies in custody. Tragic accident. Happens all the time. Prisoner-on-prisoner violence. Guards who looked away at the wrong moment. By the time Internal Affairs investigates, it'll be too late. And you'll have to live with knowing you chose a criminal over your own family." The line went dead. Chloe sat in the darkness, her phone still pressed to her ear, her mind racing through possibilities that all ended the same way. Oliver dead. Oliver hurt. Oliver paying for her choices with his freedom or his life. She was moving before conscious thought caught up. Out of bed, pulling on clothes, the expensive silk pants and cashmere sweater that had become her uniform in this gilded cage. Her leg barely protested now. The carbon fiber cast doing its job, healing her faster than nature intended. She grabbed the cane anyway, more weapon than support, and headed for the door. The penthouse was dark except for the ambient light from the city beyond the windows. Chloe moved through the hallways she'd memorized over the past week, heading for the private elevator that led to the parking garage. She didn't have a plan, didn't know where she'd go or how she'd get Oliver out. She just knew she had to move, had to do something, had to. Going somewhere? Chloe spun. Hangyeol stood in the shadows near the elevator, wearing black sleep pants and nothing else. His tattooed torso caught the dim light, dragons coiling across his chest and shoulders like they were alive. His expression was unreadable. "He has Oliver." Chloe's voice cracked. "He arrested him on false charges. He's going to kill him if I don't surrender. I have to go. I have to fix this." By walking into a trap, Hangyeol moved closer, his bare feet silent on the marble floor. By giving Sterling exactly what he wants. By sacrificing yourself for temporary mercy that won't last beyond the moment you're back in his control. He's my brother, my baby brother. I raised him when our parents couldn't. I can't let him. Tears burned her eyes, hot and furious. "You don't understand. You don't have family. You don't know what it's like to..." The slap of his hand against the wall beside her head cut her off. Not threatening her, just creating a cage of his body around hers. His eyes were black fire in the darkness. "I had a sister," he said quietly. "Younger, beautiful, kind in a way this world doesn't deserve. She fell in love with a man who wore a uniform and smiled in public and beat her bloody in private. I didn't know. She hid it well, lied for him, protected him." His jaw tightened, until the day she couldn't anymore. Until the day he went too far and she didn't wake up. Chloe's breath caught. "Hangyeol. I found her 3 days later. He'd called it an accident, tragic fall. The department believed him because he was one of them. Good officer. family man, pillar of the community. Han Gil's voice was empty now, carved hollow by old grief. I killed him slowly, made it last, made him understand what she'd felt every time his fists found her face. And when he finally stopped breathing, I made a promise. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. I promised I would never let another man hide behind a badge and hurt women without consequence. That I would build an empire strong enough to touch the untouchable. That I would burn down anyone who thought authority made them immune to justice. His hand came up to cup her face. Your husband is one of those men, and your brother's arrest isn't leverage, Chloe. It's desperation. Sterling knows his time is running out, and he's playing the only card he has left. But Oliver is already out. Chloe blinked. What? Han Gil pulled out his phone, pressed a button, and held it up. A video played, security footage from what looked like a police station. Timestamp, 2:47 a.m. She watched as Oliver was led from a holding cell by two officers she didn't recognize. Watched as they removed his cuffs, handed him his belongings, and escorted him out a side entrance where a black car waited. The video cut to interior car footage. Oliver in the back seat, confused and shaking, staring at one of Han Gil's men. Where are you taking me? Somewhere safe. Mr. Han's orders. Who the hell is Mr. Han? The man who's keeping you alive. The video ended. Han Gil lowered his phone, his expression almost gentle. I had people in position before Sterling made his move. Your brother never spent more than 40 minutes in custody. The officers who arrested him are in my pocket. The drugs they found are already destroyed. The assault charge is fiction, without witnesses willing to testify. He tilted Chloe's face up, forcing her to meet his eyes. Sterling called you thinking he had leverage. All he did was confirm what I already knew. What's that? That he's willing to destroy anyone to get to you. Which means he's not just dangerous to you anymore. He's dangerous to everyone you love. Han Gil's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. And that changes the rules of engagement. What are you going to do? He corrected softly. What are we going to do? Because this is your fight as much as mine now. Sterling threatened your family, used his badge as a weapon against an innocent man, proved he'll burn down the world before he lets you go. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe, space to think. So here's the choice, Chloe. You can leave. Take Oliver and run. I'll give you money, new identities, protection, until you're somewhere Sterling can't reach. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, but you'll be alive. You'll be free of both of us. Or, Han Gil's smile was cold. Final. Beautiful in its absolute certainty. Or we stop running, we stop hiding, we stop letting Mark Sterling play hero while wearing a villain's face. He extended his hand toward her, palm up, offering. Or you stay, and we burn his world down around him. Expose every corrupt deal, every woman he's hurt, every law he's broken while hiding behind that badge. We don't negotiate with terrorists, Chloe. We eliminate them. Chloe stared at his outstretched hand. At the man who'd just revealed he understood exactly what it meant to lose someone to violence disguised as love, who'd built an empire on the ashes of his sister's murder, who'd been watching her, protecting her from a distance, waiting for her to be ready. She thought about Oliver, safely extracted before Mark could make good on his threats. About the 40 women Kim had trafficked while Mark looked away. About 3 years of systematic destruction wrapped in wedding vows. About the Steinway waiting in the music room. About playing piano again without permission. About feeling fire in her veins instead of fear. Chloe reached out and took Han Gil's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain and absolutely unbreakable. Teach me, she said quietly. Teach me how to destroy him. Han Gil pulled her close, his other hand sliding into her hair, tilting her face up to meet his dark eyes. It would be my pleasure. The training room existed somewhere Chloe hadn't explored in the penthouse, a lower level accessed by a private elevator that required Han Gil's fingerprint to activate. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that looked like it belonged in a military facility, not a luxury residence. Padded floors, mirrored walls, equipment that ranged from traditional martial arts gear to things she couldn't identify, and weapons. An entire wall dedicated to blades of various lengths and purposes, displayed like art in a gallery devoted to violence. "This is where I come when words aren't enough," Hanjol said, moving past her into the space. He'd changed into fitted black training clothes that showed every line of muscle across his back and shoulders. The dragons tattooed on his skin seemed to move as he walked. "This is where I remember what I am, underneath the suits and the boardrooms and the civilized negotiations." Chloe followed him inside, her leg still tender but functional. The carbon fiber cast would come off in another week, Dr. Choi had promised. Until then, she moved carefully, aware of her body's fragility in a way she'd never been before Mark had taught her that bones break and skin tears and everything beautiful can be destroyed. "I don't know how to fight," she said quietly. "I know. That's why we're here." Hanjol turned to face her, his expression serious. "Your leg is healing. Your arm is stronger every day. But you still move like a victim. Like you're waiting for the next blow. Like your body is something that happens to you instead of something you control." The words stung because they were true. Chloe had spent 3 years making herself smaller, quieter, less likely to trigger Mark's rage. Had learned to anticipate violence and position herself to minimize damage. Had become an expert in survival through submission. "I don't want to be that person anymore," she heard herself say. "Then we start now." Hangyol moved to the weapon wall, his fingers trailing across different blades before selecting one. A tactical knife, maybe 6 inches long, with a handle that looked designed for grip rather than show. "Come here." Chloe crossed the training room, each step deliberate. Hangyol held the knife out to her, handle first. "Take it." She did. The weight of it was surprising. Heavier than she expected, balanced in a way that felt purposeful. The blade caught the overhead lights, gleaming like a promise. "How does it feel?" Hangyol asked. "Dangerous." "Good. It should." He moved behind her, his body close enough that she could feel his heat. "Now, most self-defense training will teach you pressure points, vulnerable areas, how to disable an attacker and run. That's useful for surviving random violence, but that's not what you need." His hands came to rest on her shoulders, turning her to face the mirrored wall. She saw herself reflected back too thin, still healing, holding a knife like she was afraid it might bite her. "You need to learn how to destroy someone who thinks they know you, someone who's convinced you're weak, someone who believes their authority makes them untouchable." Hangyol's voice dropped lower, his breath warm against her ear. "You need to learn how to kill your husband." Chloe's reflection stared back at her, eyes wide. "I can't." "You can, and you will. Because the next time Mark Sterling gets close to you, it won't be in a controlled environment. It won't be when you have backup. It will be when he's convinced he's won. When he thinks you're broken enough to take back." Hangyol's hands slid down her arms to her hands, adjusting her grip on the knife. "And in that moment, you need to be ready to end him. I'm not a killer. No, you're not." His reflection met hers in the mirror. "But you're a survivor who's tired of surviving. There's a difference, and I'm going to teach you how to make that difference matter." For the next 2 hours, Hangyol broke down violence into mechanics. How to hold a blade so it wouldn't slip. Where to strike on a human body to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. The difference between slashing and stabbing. How to use someone's size and strength against them. Chloe's leg ached. Her arm trembled. Sweat soaked through her training clothes. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because every movement, every strike, every correction from Hangyol was rewriting something fundamental in her body's memory. "Again," he said for the 100th time. "You're still hesitating. Still pulling back at the last second. I don't want to hurt you. I'm not Sterling." Hangyol caught her wrist, holding the practice knife she'd switched to inches from his ribs. "I can take the hit, but more importantly, you need to learn that hurting someone who deserves it isn't something to be afraid of. It's justice. It's survival. It's taking back the power they stole from you." He released her wrist and stepped back, gesturing for her to try again. Chloe adjusted her grip, felt the weight of the practice blade, and moved. This time, she didn't pull back, didn't hesitate. The blade struck Han Gyeol's protective vest with a solid thunk that reverberated up her arm. Better. His smile was approving. Again. Faster this time. They moved through combinations, strike patterns, defensive maneuvers that turned into offensive ones. Han Gyeol was relentless, pushing her past the point where her body screamed for rest, where her injured leg threatened to give out, where tears of frustration burned behind her eyes. "Why are you crying?" he asked, not unkindly, when she finally stumbled. "Because I'm weak. Because I can barely stand and you want me to fight and I don't know how to." "You're crying because you're angry." Han Gyeol caught her before she fell, steadying her with hands that were surprisingly gentle. "You're angry at him for breaking you, angry at yourself for staying, angry at me for making you face how much you've lost. That's good. Anger is fuel. Fear is fuel. Every emotion Sterling taught you to suppress is a weapon waiting to be used." He guided her to sit on a bench along the wall, then crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. "Physical training is only half of this. The other half is learning to weaponize everything he tried to destroy. Your fear? That's the thing that kept you alive when survival meant submission. Your anger? That's 3 years of accumulated rage looking for a target. Your shame? That's understanding that you deserved better and didn't get it." His hand came up to cup her face. "Sterling spent years teaching you that your emotions made you weak. I'm going to teach you that they make you lethal." Chloe stared at him, this man who'd killed without hesitation but touched her like she was made of glass. "How?" "By learning to perform." Han Gyeol's smile was sharp. "You're a musician, Chloe. You know how to read a room, how to build tension, how to make people feel exactly what you want them to feel. That's psychological warfare. That's the art of making someone believe they're winning right up until the moment you destroy them." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Sterling thinks he knows you, thinks you're broken beyond repair, thinks all he has to do is apply enough pressure and you'll crack." Han Gyeol pulled her to her feet, keeping her steady when her leg wobbled. "We're going to let him believe that. Let him think his leverage worked. Let him think you're coming back because you have no choice. But I'm not coming back. No, you're walking into his world armed with everything I'm teaching you. You're going to smile for the cameras, play the rescued victim. Let him think he's won." Han Gyeol's hand tightened on hers. "And then, at the exact moment he feels safe, when he's convinced you're his again, you're going to show him what you've become." Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. "And what's that?" "Fire." Han Gyeol's eyes glittered with something dark and beautiful. "You're going to show him your fire, and he's been sleeping next to gasoline." Over the next 10 days, the training intensified. Han Gyeol brought in specialists, a woman who taught her how to read body language, how to lie convincingly, how to play vulnerable while calculating 3 moves ahead. A former intelligence operative who showed her pressure points that disabled without leaving obvious marks. A psychologist who explained how trauma bonding worked and how to use it against someone who thought they'd conditioned you. Chloe absorbed it all like she was learning a new instrument. Each lesson was a note in a larger composition. Each skill another tool in the arsenal she was building. Her leg healed. The cast came off, leaving skin that was pale and sensitive but whole. She could walk without pain now. Run, even. Fight without her body betraying her at the critical moment. And through it all, Han Gyeol was there, pushing her, believing in her, seeing something in her that she was only beginning to recognize in herself. On the 11th day, Chloe stood in the training room holding the real knife, not the practice blade, but the tactical one she'd first touched, and faced Han Gyeol across the padded floor. "Show me," he said. She moved, fast, controlled, every lesson compressed into muscle memory. Han Gyeol blocked, countered, tested her defenses. But this time, Chloe didn't hesitate, didn't pull back, didn't apologize for taking up space. When the blade stopped an inch from his throat, both of them breathing hard, Han Gyeol's smile was pure pride. "There she is," he said softly. "There's my queen." Chloe lowered the knife, her hand steady. "I'm ready." "Yes." Han Gyeol caught her face between his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "You are. Now let's give Sterling exactly what he thinks he wants." Sterling is threatening an innocent sibling just to get control back. If you can't stand toxic manipulators who use family as leverage, subscribe right now. Comment, family is off limits, to stand against Sterling's tactics. The invitation arrived through channels so carefully orchestrated that even Chloe had to admire the audacity. The Seoul Metropolitan Police Department's annual charity gala. Black tie. Televised. The city's elite gathering to celebrate law enforcement's finest, while pretending their donations made a difference in a world that kept breaking the same way. And Detective Mark Sterling would be receiving the Officer of the Year award. Han-gyeol dropped the embossed invitation on the glass table in the music room where Chloe had been practicing. She'd been working through Chopin's Ballade No. 1, letting the complexity of it consume her thoughts. But the moment she saw Mark's name printed in elegant script, her fingers froze on the keys. "He's being honored," she said flatly. "For what? Exceptional brutality? Outstanding dedication to corruption? For his tireless work advocating for domestic violence victims." Han-gyeol's voice was dry. Apparently, his personal tragedy, losing his wife to a criminal organization, has inspired him to champion women's safety initiatives across the city. He's giving interviews, appearing on panels. The department is using his story to secure additional funding. Chloe's hands clenched into fists on the piano keys, creating a discordant crash. "He's profiting from my kidnapping, building a career on the lie that he's a victim." Yes, and in 3 days, he'll accept that award in front of Seoul's most powerful citizens, every major news outlet, and a live broadcast that will reach millions. Han-gyeol moved behind her, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. "Unless we give them a better story." She turned on the piano bench to look up at him. His expression was calculating, the look he got when he was assembling pieces of a plan that existed 3 moves ahead of everyone else. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Mark Sterling is about to have his perfect moment interrupted by a ghost." Han-gyeol's smile was sharp. "I'm thinking his kidnapped wife is going to walk into that gala and remind everyone that dead women sometimes come back to haunt their killers." Chloe's heart began to race. "You want me to attend? Not as a victim, not as someone who needs rescuing." His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. "As a performer. You'll play piano for Seoul's elite. You'll be beautiful and poised and completely in control. And when Mark sees you, when he realizes you're not broken, not hiding, not his anymore, he'll do exactly what men like him always do. He'll lose control. In front of cameras, in front of witnesses, in front of everyone who's been calling him a hero." Han-gyeol crouched in front of her, his eyes level with hers. "We've been building the case against him for weeks. Evidence of corruption, testimony from the women he's hurt, bank records connecting him to trafficking operations. But evidence can be dismissed. Testimony can be discredited. What we need is for him to destroy himself. And you think seeing me will make him do that? I think seeing you thriving will make him forget every careful lie he's constructed. I think his need to control you will override his survival instinct." Han-gyeol's hand came up to cup her face. "But this only works if you're ready. If you can walk into that room knowing he'll be there, knowing he'll try to approach you, knowing you'll have to perform the role of your life while he's watching." Chloe thought about the training room, about the knife that no longer felt foreign in her hand, about psychological warfare and weaponized emotion, and learning to turn fear into fuel. "What do I need to do?" Han-gyeol's smile was beautiful and terrifying. "Be yourself. Be the woman who played jazz like she was on fire. Be the queen you were before he convinced you that you were nothing." The next 3 days were a controlled hurricane of preparation. A stylist appeared, an elegant woman named Min-seo who looked at Chloe's healing body with clinical assessment rather than pity. She brought fabric samples, took measurements, and returned the next day with a dress that made Chloe forget how to breathe. Midnight blue silk that flowed like water. Long sleeves that covered the fading bruises on her arms. A neckline that was elegant rather than revealing. The dress moved with her body, making her look taller, stronger, like someone who commanded attention rather than shrank from it. "It's perfect," Min-seo said with satisfaction. "You look like power wrapped in silk, like someone who could destroy a man with a smile." Hair and makeup came next. Natural but polished. Her natural curls styled into something that looked effortless, but probably took an hour to achieve. Makeup that covered the last traces of the head wound but let her actual face show through. She looked like herself, like a version of herself she'd forgotten existed. Han Gyeol's expression when he saw her in the full ensemble was worth every moment of preparation. He stood in the doorway of her room, perfectly tailored in a black tuxedo that made him look like violence dressed for the opera, and just stared. "Chloe, is it too much?" She turned, letting the dress move around her. Minseo said, "You're devastating." He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands finding her waist. "Sterling is going to take one look at you and realize he never actually owned anything. That what he destroyed was just the cage, not the bird. Good." Chloe met his eyes in the full-length mirror. "That's exactly what I want him to see." The gala was being held at the Shilla Hotel's Grand Ballroom, a space designed to make wealthy people feel like their money bought them access to beauty. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, windows overlooking the Han River. It was the kind of venue where power congregated and pretended to care about charity. Han Gyeol's car pulled up to the entrance 30 minutes after the event started, late enough to make an entrance. Early enough that Mark would still be working the room, playing the grieving husband, accepting condolences for his tragic situation. "Remember," Han Gyeol said as the driver opened the door, "you're not here as his wife. You're here as the evening's musical entertainment. I arranged it through intermediaries. The organizers think they're getting a rising jazz talent. They don't know who you are until you walk in. And when Mark sees me, let him come to you. Let him make the first move. Everything that happens after that, he brings on himself." Han Gyeol took her hand, helped her from the car. "I'll be watching. My people will be positioned throughout the venue. You're never alone, even when it looks like you are." Chloe stepped onto the red carpet, her heels clicking against pavement, cameras flashing from the press line. She didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge the questions being shouted about who she was, who had designed her dress, whether she was someone they should recognize. She just walked into the ballroom like she owned it. The space was exactly as opulent as she'd expected. Hundreds of people in evening wear, holding champagne flutes and pretending their conversations mattered. A stage at the far end, where a quartet played background music. Tables arranged around a central dance floor. And at the head table, wearing his dress uniform with its commendations gleaming, sat Mark Sterling. He hadn't seen her yet. Was laughing at something his captain was saying, playing the role of humble hero, the man who'd lost everything but kept fighting for justice. Chloe moved through the crowd toward the stage coordinator, a harried woman with a clipboard and the expression of someone managing chaos. "I'm tonight's pianist," Chloe said quietly. "When would you like me to perform?" The woman looked up, relief flooding her features. "Oh, thank God. We thought you weren't coming. You're scheduled after the award presentations. Probably another 30 minutes?" She gestured toward the piano, a beautiful Steinway, smaller than the one in Han Gyeol's music room but still concert quality. "You can warm up if you need to. Just keep it soft until you're set." Chloe crossed to the piano, aware of eyes following her now. Curious glances, whispered questions about who she was. She sat at the bench, adjusted her position, and let her fingers find the keys. She started with something soft, ambient, Bill Evans's Peace Piece, the kind of jazz that filled space without demanding attention, the kind of music that made people feel sophisticated while they ignored it. But Chloe wasn't playing for them. She was playing for herself, reminding her hands what they were capable of, reminding her body that it could create beauty, not just absorb pain. And she was playing for the moment when Mark Sterling would look up from his table of admirers and see the ghost of his dead wife sitting at a piano in front of everyone he'd convinced that he was innocent. The music floated through the ballroom. Conversations continued. Champagne flowed, and Chloe waited for the exact moment when her husband's carefully constructed world would begin to crack. It took 12 minutes. She felt his eyes on her before she saw him. That familiar weight of attention that used to make her freeze. But now, with Han Gyeol's training woven into her muscle memory and a knife strapped to her thigh beneath the silk dress, Mark's gaze felt like vindication. She didn't look up. didn't acknowledge him, just kept playing, letting the music speak what words couldn't. And somewhere in the ballroom, she knew Han-gyeol was watching both of them, waiting for the moment when everything they'd planned would finally, beautifully, catastrophically unfold. The award presentation began with speeches that made Chloe's stomach turn. The police commissioner praising Mark's dedication, a domestic violence advocate talking about how his advocacy had changed departmental policy, a montage of photos showing Mark at charity events, speaking to victims' groups, standing beside politicians who championed women's safety. Every word was a lie wrapped in truth. Every image carefully curated to hide the monster underneath. Chloe kept playing softly, background music for Mark's coronation. She watched him accept the crystal trophy, his face arranged in humble gratitude. Watched him approach the microphone to give his speech. "I want to thank everyone for this incredible honor," Mark began, his voice carrying through the ballroom with practiced sincerity. "But I can't accept this award without acknowledging why I'm standing here. 3 weeks ago, my wife Chloe was taken from me by a criminal organization. Every day since, I've worked tirelessly to find her, to bring her home, to..." Chloe's hands found new keys, different music. The opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, but played with an edge that transformed the familiar melody into something haunting, something that demanded attention. The conversations around the room faltered. Heads turned toward the piano. The music swelled, filling every corner of the ballroom with sound that was beautiful and broken and utterly impossible to ignore. Mark's voice trailed off mid-sentence. Chloe looked up from the keys, met his eyes across the distance, let him see her face fully for the first time. The color drained from Mark's face. The trophy slipped from his hands, hitting the stage with a crash that echoed through the sudden silence. She stood from the piano bench, the midnight blue dress catching the light, and walked to center stage. Someone thrust a microphone toward her, the stage coordinator, maybe, or a sound tech who recognized that something important was happening. Chloe took it. Her hands were steady. "I'm Chloe Sterling," she said into the silence. "Or I was. I don't know if I'll keep that name after tonight." Her voice carried through the ballroom, amplified by speakers meant to project the commissioner's speeches. 3 weeks ago, I sent a text message asking for help. I'd just had my leg broken by the man you're honoring tonight. The man standing behind me, who can't seem to form words anymore. The crowd erupted. Gasps, shocked whispers, camera phones appearing like flowers blooming in fast forward. "I sent that text to the wrong number," a stranger replied and came to save me. "Not the police. Not the department that's giving my husband an award for advocating for women like me." Chloe's eyes found the cameras at the back of the room, the ones broadcasting this ceremony live. "The man who rescued me was the criminal you've been told kidnapped me. But here's the truth: Mark Sterling broke my arm 2 weeks before that night, fractured my leg a month before that, gave me a concussion 4 months ago that he claimed was from a fall." Mark found his voice. "She's not well. I've been silent." Chloe cut him off, her voice strong. "Certain. I've been terrified. I've been broken and put back together and broken again. But I'm not silent anymore." She set the microphone down carefully on the piano and walked off stage. Not running, not fleeing, just moving with purpose toward the backstage area where equipment cases and instrument storage created shadows perfect for what came next. She heard Mark follow. Heavy footsteps, angry breathing. The sound of a man whose carefully constructed facade had just shattered on live television. The backstage area was dimly lit, exactly as Han-gyeol had promised it would be. Chloe moved between equipment cases toward the far wall, letting Mark think she was running, letting him believe this was a chase he could win. "You stupid bitch," Mark hissed, his hand closing around her arm, the same grip he'd used 1,000 times before. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? I will destroy you. I will..." Chloe pivoted. The movement was instinctive now, 11 days of training compressed into muscle memory. Her elbow drove into Mark's solar plexus, exactly where Han-gyeol had taught her. Mark's grip loosened, air exploding from his lungs. She spun out of his reach, creating distance, her hand already moving to the knife strapped to her thigh beneath the silk dress. You're done running your mouth, Mark. Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. You're done hurting me. You're done playing victim while collecting awards for destroying women. Mark straightened, his face twisted with rage. He was bigger, stronger, and had spent years teaching her that her body was something he controlled. He lunged, expecting her to freeze, expecting fear to paralyze her like it always had. But Chloe wasn't the woman he'd married anymore. She sidestepped his charge, using his momentum against him exactly as she'd practiced. Her foot connected with the back of his knee, the pressure point that Han-gil had made her strike 100 times, and Mark went down hard. The knife was in her hand before he hit the ground. Not to kill, not yet, just present, visible, a promise that everything had changed. How does it feel? Chloe asked softly, standing over him. Being on the ground, being the one who's afraid, being the one who realizes they've miscalculated everything. Mark's hand went to his belt, to the gun he always carried, the weapon he'd used to threaten her, to control her, to remind her that he had the authority to hurt her and call it justified. But his holster was empty. Looking for this? Han-gil stepped from the shadows near the back wall. Mark's service weapon held casually in one hand. He was still in his tuxedo, still looking like violence dressed for the opera, and his smile was absolutely terrifying. Han-gil, Mark breathed, recognition and fear mixing in his voice. Detective Sterling. Han-gil moved closer, each step deliberate. I believe you've been looking for me, putting out warrants, calling me a criminal, telling the world I kidnapped your wife. You did kidnap her. I saved her. There's a difference. Han-gil looked at Chloe, pride evident in his expression. Though it seems she doesn't need much saving anymore. That was beautifully executed. Chloe kept the knife steady, kept her position over Mark. Is it done? Oh, yes. Han-gil pulled out his phone, pressed a button, and suddenly the backstage area was flooded with light from multiple angles. Cameras, at least 6 of them, positioned to capture everything that had just happened. Every word, every movement. Every moment of you defending yourself against your abusive husband has been broadcast to the screens in the ballroom. Mark's face went gray. You can't, that's illegal. You can't. I can. And I did. Han-gil gestured, and his men materialized from the shadows, the same black-clad operatives who'd breached Chloe's apartment 3 weeks ago. The good news is that everyone in that ballroom just watched you threaten your supposedly kidnapped wife, watched you call her names, watched you reach for your weapon to silence her. The bad news is that several news outlets are also broadcasting this feed. It's already trending on social media. Your face is everywhere, detective. And not as a hero. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the backstage area. Heavy, official, multiple sets. That would be internal affairs, Han-gil said conversationally. Along with several officers who aren't on your payroll. They'll be taking you into custody. Not for kidnapping, as you'd hoped, but for assault. Domestic violence, corruption, and that's just the beginning. We have witnesses ready to testify. Bank records showing your connection to trafficking operations. Evidence that will bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again. Mark's eyes found Chloe's. For the first time since she'd known him, she saw real fear there. Not anger disguised as concern, not control masquerading as love. Just pure, desperate fear. Chloe, please, we can fix this. We can. There is no we. Mark. Chloe lowered the knife, stepped back, let Han-gil's men move in to restrain him. There never really was. Just you, and the woman you tried to destroy, and the mistake you made thinking broken and dead were the same thing. Internal affairs flooded the backstage area. Chloe watched them take Mark into custody, reading him his rights while he shouted about conspiracies and frame jobs and how everyone would see he was innocent. But nobody was listening anymore. Han-gil's hand found hers, warm and steady and absolutely certain. Are you all right? Chloe looked down at the knife still in her hand. At the man being led away in handcuffs. At the cameras still recording everything. I'm better than all right, she said quietly. I'm free. Han-gil pulled her close, his other hand coming up to cup her face. Yes, you are. And now the whole world knows what he is. What you are. And that justice sometimes comes from the places they least expect. Through the backstage curtains, Chloe could hear the ballroom erupting, voices raised in shock and anger and vindication. The story spreading like wildfire through Seoul's elite. The narrative shifting in real time from decorated detective to exposed abuser. She'd walked into that ballroom as a ghost. She was leaving as something else entirely. A survivor who'd stopped surviving and started fighting back. Chloe just exposed her abuser to the whole world. If you believe justice should always be served publicly, hit like, comment, expose the truth. If you're cheering for her victory. The news cycle exploded. Within hours of the gala, every major outlet was running the footage. Chloe standing at the piano. Mark's face draining of color. The backstage confrontation broadcast to millions. By morning, 3 more women had come forward with stories of Detective Mark Sterling's violence. By afternoon, the police commissioner had resigned. By evening, the entire corruption network Sterling had been part of was unraveling like thread pulled from rotten fabric. Chloe watched it all from Han-gyeol's penthouse, 43 floors above the chaos. She'd changed out of the midnight blue dress into comfortable clothes, silk loungewear that had become her uniform in this suspended palace. Her leg no longer ached. Her arm was strong. The scars on her head were fading into thin white lines that her hair mostly covered. She looked like someone who'd survived, who'd healed, who'd won. Oliver had come to visit the day after the gala, breaking down the moment he saw her. Her little brother, who'd tried so hard to protect her, who'd begged her to leave Mark years ago. He'd held her while he cried, kept saying, I knew, I should have done something, until Chloe had to remind him that she was the one who'd stayed, that her choices weren't his burden to carry. He'd met Han-gyeol with suspicion that lasted approximately 10 minutes before dissolving into grudging respect. He's terrifying, Oliver had whispered when Han-gyeol left them alone. But he looks at you like you're the only thing in the world that matters. So I guess that's something. Now, 5 days after the gala, Chloe stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows watching rain transform Seoul into something liquid and luminous. The city lights blurred through the water streaming down the glass, creating patterns that looked almost alive. She heard Han-gyeol enter before she saw him, that particular rhythm of footsteps that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Can't sleep, he asked, moving to stand beside her. Too much thinking. Chloe didn't look away from the window. The news says Mark is being held in solitary, that he's on suicide watch because he tried to hang himself with his bedsheet. Yes, that's what the news says. Something in his tone made her turn. Han-gyeol's expression was carefully neutral, but there was a weight to his words that suggested layers beneath the surface. Did he actually try to kill himself? Chloe asked quietly. Does it matter? Han-gyeol's eyes met hers. He's alive. For now. Being held in a facility where every guard, every inmate, every person who comes within reach of him knows exactly what he is. A decorated detective who beat his wife and hid behind his badge. The kind of man who makes even criminals feel morally superior. You're saying prison won't be kind to him. I'm saying prison will be exactly what he deserves. Every day. Until it isn't anymore. Han-gyeol's hand found hers on the window ledge. But that's not what you're really asking. You want to know if I'll have him killed. Chloe's breath caught. The question had been circling her mind for days, unspoken but present. Will you? Do you want me to? She thought about it. Really thought about it. About Mark suffering versus Mark dead. About justice versus vengeance. About closure that came from knowing he couldn't hurt anyone else ever again. I want to know he can't destroy any more women, Chloe said finally. I want to know he can't smile for cameras and collect awards while bodies pile up behind him. I want to know that what happened to me was the last time, not just another chapter in his history. Then you already know the answer. Han-gyeol's thumb traced circles on her hand. Men like Sterling don't rehabilitate. They don't learn. They don't change. They wait for opportunities and they strike again. The system will process him. He'll get 20 years, maybe 30. He'll be eligible for parole in 12. And when he gets out, he'll find someone else to hurt. Yes. Han-gyeol turned to face her fully. So the question isn't whether he deserves to die. The question is whether you can live with knowing I ended him to protect women who don't even know they need protecting yet. Chloe stared at this man who'd become her savior, her teacher, her partner in destroying the monster she'd married, who'd killed without hesitation but never without purpose, who'd built an empire on protecting the vulnerable from predators who hid in plain sight. I can live with it, she said quietly. I think I can live with a lot of things now that I couldn't before. Han-gyeol's smile was slow, approving. Good, because I need to ask you something, and the answer will determine what happens next. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Black, like everything else he owned. Like the night beyond the windows. Like the dress she'd worn to destroy her husband's career. Chloe's heart began to hammer. Before you open it, Han-gyeol said, his voice dropping lower. I need you to understand what I'm offering. Not marriage in the traditional sense. Not the cage your husband built and called love. I'm offering you partnership. Power. A place at my side that's equal, not subordinate. I'm offering you soul, if you want it. Everything I've built, everything I am. He opened the box. Inside, catching the ambient light like captured shadow, sat a black diamond. Massive, flawless, set in platinum that looked like it had been forged specifically for her finger. I've watched you for 5 years, Han-gyeol continued. I've seen you play music like you were conversing with gods. I've seen you survive what should have killed you. I've seen you transform from victim to weapon to queen. And I want, his voice caught just slightly, I want you to rule beside me. Not behind me, not beneath me, beside me. Chloe stared at the ring. At the man holding it. At the city spread out below them like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. What happened to respecting boundaries? She asked, but there was no accusation in her voice. Just curiosity. To not taking what isn't offered? You texted me. Han-gyeol's smile was devastating. You asked for help. You invited me into your life. Everything after that has been you choosing to stay, choosing to train, choosing to face Sterling, choosing to burn down the world that tried to keep you small. I'm just asking if you'll choose me, permanently, completely, with full knowledge of what that means. And what does it mean? It means you're mine. And I'm yours. It means anyone who threatens you answers to me. It means your enemies become my enemies. Your battles become my wars. He pulled the ring from the box, held it between them like a promise. It means you play piano in my music room whenever you want. It means you have your brother over for dinner. It means you build whatever life you want within the structure I've created. But it also means you accept that structure. Accept what I am. Accept that sometimes I'll come home with blood on my hands and you'll have to be okay with that. Chloe looked at the ring. At Han-gyeol's face. At the life he was offering that was beautiful and brutal and completely honest in a way Mark had never been. Mark is going to die, she said. Not a question. A confirmation. Within the week. It will look like prison justice. An inmate with a grudge. Guards who were too slow to intervene. The kind of thing that happens to cops in general population. And I'll know you orchestrated it. Yes, you'll know. You'll always know what I am. What I'm capable of. There won't be any lies between us, Chloe. No pretending I'm civilized just because I wear expensive suits and own legitimate businesses. I'm a monster who kills monsters. And if you accept this ring, you accept that reality. Chloe extended her left hand. The hand that had worn Mark's 2-carat diamond for 4 years while he systematically destroyed everything beautiful about her life. Put it on, she said quietly. Han-gyeol's expression shifted into something that might have been vulnerability if he were capable of such a thing. He slid the black diamond onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Like everything in his penthouse had been made for her. Like he'd been preparing for this moment since the night he first heard her play jazz 5 years ago. Yes? He asked, needing to hear her say it. Yes. Chloe lifted her hand, watched the black diamond catch the light. Yes to partnership. Yes to soul. Yes to you, exactly as you are. Yes to being fire instead of ashes. Han-gyeol pulled her close, his hands framing her face, his forehead resting against hers. I will protect you with everything I am, he whispered. I will burn down anyone who tries to hurt you. I will give you the world if you want it, and I will never ever make you small to make myself feel big. I know. Chloe's hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the expensive fabric of his shirt. That's why I'm saying yes. He kissed her then. Not gentle, not asking permission, but not demanding either. Just claiming what she was offering, what she'd been offering since the moment she stopped running and started fighting back. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the rain outside had intensified. The city below was drowning in it, being washed clean by water that would dry and leave everything exactly as it had been before. But inside the penthouse, 43 floors above Seoul, everything had changed. Chloe Gittens, who'd been broken and put back together and broken again, until she learned that breaking wasn't the end of the story, stood beside a man who'd built an empire on violence and called it justice. And together, they watched the rain. 3 days later, Detective Mark Sterling was found dead in his cell. Inmate on inmate violence, the report said. A tragic but not unexpected outcome for a police officer in general population. Internal Affairs investigated, found nothing suspicious. The case was closed within 48 hours. Chloe played piano at his funeral, a haunting jazz arrangement that made everyone cry for reasons they couldn't quite name. She wore black, accepted condolences, played the grieving widow one final time, and when it was over, she went home to the penthouse where Hanjeol was waiting with champagne and the knowledge that she'd never have to play a role again. She was free. She was powerful. She was loved in a way that was dark and possessive and completely brutally honest. She was fire. And Seoul had better learn to burn. Chloe went from broken to unbreakable. If you believe in second chances and finding love in the darkest places, make sure you're subscribed. Share this story with someone who needs to know that they are strong enough to survive.